para que lo escuches a él allá Estados Unidos.
How are you, my friend?
I think I've got a terrible case of allergies, but other than
Okay,
that, I'm doing fine.
awesome. Well, it's a great honor to have you as a guest on my inaugural show of Victor Escalante Live. Leave it to an entrepreneur to jump out of an airplane and build a parachute on the way down, right?
Exactly.
I want to give you a little bit of history. Bryan, as I've mentioned previously, is the author along with his brother, Jeffrey Eisenberg. He's done it again with another best-selling book of the Rice and Beans Millionaire. I first met Bryan in 2006 at Wizard Academy when he and his brother were rolling out his first book, Waiting for Your Cat to Bark. What different times those were, Bryan, compared to today's market.
You aren't kidding. It's interesting because someone recently asked me, said, what's the difference between the books you were writing back then and the books you're writing now? And I think, back then we needed to be pushing the envelope, right? Helping people understand the change that was coming. I mean, obviously, we were already working in the internet for almost 10 years at that point, but most people still didn't really understand the impact that the internet was going to have on all kinds of business, right? And I think, if you look at our more recent books, they're focused in on a broader audience, focusing in not just on marketers, but on CEOs and entrepreneurs, and trying to help them understand the impact of what the rules of business are today.
Correct. At that time, I was working in legacy media, working for the Houston Chronicle, and I could see into the future how the internet was going to totally disrupt the newspaper industry and how they were powerless to do anything because of the very strict hierarchical system that they used to build the industry. And sure enough, in 2008, the collapse of media and the economy, they could not rebound. And today, they're only a fraction of what they used to be in terms of the reach of the Houston Chronicle in the general Houston area. So I saw the demise of legacy media as a result of the internet. Bryan, talk to us about how entrepreneurs need to be aware of the current times in terms of promotion, whether it's their business or whether it's their personal brand.
So this most recent book, The Rice and Beans Millionaire, it was a step back for me trying to write a book that I wanted to give to my kids, right? I wanted to pass on to them the 30 plus years of being an entrepreneur and working with entrepreneurs and trying to put down the timeless principles that not only apply today, but will apply 10 years from now, 20 years from now, as they become successful. And I think the big changes, and I think that the ones that most businesses need to take into account is, number one, how important, executing to, their best every single day is critical to success, right? You can't just have, your average employees show up on a below average day and hope that you're going to be successful. It's just not going to work. So you've got to find ways to keep your team inspired. Second, I think when we think about influence, right, and sales and marketing, we need to think about it differently today. Getting people's attention, which is the first, part of the pyramid that we talked about 20 years ago: attention, interest, desire, action, and then satisfaction, which is this is an important part. I think, you have to spend 5 minutes on TikTok and watch kids on TikTok to understand how attention shifted, right? It's no longer, as you said, the old traditional media. My kids haven't looked at a newspaper in forever. And then third, if you're going to create an amazing experience, you have to plan and budget for word of mouth, because you have to give something that's going to wow people so that they can share their story, their intersection with your brand, right? So that you can get kind of that, boulder coming down the mountain effect of people talking about your brand.
Yes, that's very interesting that you talk about the idea behind the book of being able to write something simple. And as a matter of fact, I have an 11-year-old that I'm going to have him read your book next so that he can understand entrepreneurship. He came to me recently wanting to buy a $200 pair of sneakers. I asked him, wouldn't you rather use that money to make more money and make more money so that you can have even more money to buy any kind of sneakers you want? So that's how simple the book is for anyone that is interested in starting their own business, to understand the simple mindset as well as the steps one needs to take.
Yeah, it's, it was important to me, first of all, the book got inspired by my middle son, who's a baseball player. Okay. Smart kid, not a big reader. Okay. So I knew I needed to make something that was going to at least engage him. And yes, he has read the book. Secondly, I spent a lot of years over COVID with him, and he's trying to become a professional athlete. He was this close to going to Panama to pitch in the World Baseball Classic for
Wow.
Team Argentina. Okay. Until MLB came the week beforehand and said he was ineligible, and 6 other of their pitchers were ineligible. Anyway, that's a crazy story. But the point was, I learned a lot about becoming the best, right? Executing the best. And we think about, Warren Buffett talking about the best CEO ever, right? That was part of our last book, right? Be like Amazon. Even a lemonade stand can do it. And we talked about Jeff Bezos and why his system is something that anybody can do. And what I found is it's those same principles. And yes, it's super easy that a 10, 11-year-old can read the book, but it's the layers of reading that obviously they don't have the experience to pick up on, but they're going to pick up those basic fundamentals of how do you throw a ball? How do you throw strikes? How do you hit the ball hard? But you give that to someone who's got experience and they now absorb this material, and now they start becoming elite when they start executing on these ideas on a daily basis.
Yes, as a graduate of the Dale Carnegie school system, I was very surprised to see your recommendation in the book to learn the art of friendship, to learn the art of influence. We're talking back to basics, aren't we?
We are. How sad is it today? You go out to eat in a restaurant, right? And you look at all the tables around you, and 99% of them, they're all sitting at the table like this.
Yes.
Right? And they're not investing in the number one thing. There's an article, excuse me, cedar fever here in Austin. It's not fun.
We were just up there, and the whole family got the allergies, so I had to go buy him some medicine.
Yeah, it's through the roof. But anyway, there was an article I shared yesterday on my social media that my friend Brett Hertz shared. And it showed that the number one indicator of, joy and happiness in life is investing in the relationships that you have, right? And I think that's just a fundamental that a lot of kids they haven't been taught. They haven't understood the value of that. When you see that the majority of kids today say, instead of a typical career, they want to become an influencer, means they want the camera light on them and shining. They don't understand that the great influencers are actually great at also developing great relationships with a lot of others. And I think when we can start teaching them at this point, right, middle school on up, those skills will translate as they get older. And that's all I'm hoping with the book. And you're not the first successful entrepreneur to tell me that after they read the book, the first thing they wanted to do was hand it to one of their kids.
Yes. Excellent. You are building the next generation of entrepreneurs.
That's the big hope. And interestingly enough, and you know, we could spend time on this, but I would ask if you're in a room with 20 entrepreneurs and you ask them to take a sheet of paper out and to list down all the first principles or all the fundamentals of what it takes to become a successful business today, I guarantee you that more than half of them would miss more than half of the list.
Correct.
And what we try to do in these short little chapters, you know, the audiobook is 2 hours and 18 minutes. So you can imagine you can read it in an hour and a half.
Yes.
We focused in super tight on one principle per chapter and make sure you really understand how that principle applies to your business today.
I read the book in 3 settings. So, folks, it's real thin. And if you got the time, you could do it in 1 setting. That's how simple it is for you to understand these principles that it takes to become a millionaire. This is not fiction that we're talking about here. This is about the story of a real person that became a millionaire. So talk to us without giving the spoiler alert, a little bit about the background of the person that is featured in the book.
Yeah, and there are several people featured in the book, right? You know, we have people like my friend Amanda Russell and Peter Shankman and Derek Halpern. Those are some real people that I've highlighted in the book that you can go and look up. Joe Ferraro. There's a bunch of others, but the real Rice and Beans millionaire is someone that my dad met. And my dad's name was Santiago Eisenberg, right?
Okay.
He was born in Uruguay, and he worked at that point in a bank, right? He was a vice president of the bank at this point. And he's someone I've always admired because he was, again, talk about relationships. Everybody wanted to hang out with Santiago. That was like, he was known for that. He was a special kind of person. But they had this young kid, and I don't want to give all that background, but he was a young Latino, right? And he'd come into the bank every week with a duffel bag full of cash.
And I might say a Latino that did not speak English.
Yeah, he didn't know much. I mean, he barely got through high school. Okay, I mean, he was struggling. His parents didn't know anything, and he just saw opportunity. He understood that there was an opportunity if he could figure out how to get things done, which is is the secret to all success, is getting things done.
Exactly.
And my dad had to spend a week with him to understand what his business was. And I won't reveal it, so this way you can read it in the book. But he spent a week with him traveling around, watching what he was doing. And I'm not exaggerating. This is now over 40 years that my brother and I have joked about how we wish we could come up with a rice and beans business.
Isn't that the truth? And the irony of it is that opportunity is staring at us all the time in the face, but some of us just don't look beyond the obvious to see there's an opportunity here, whether to disrupt an established industry or established business, or whether to launch a new product or service where there is a big demand.
Exactly. I mean, look, when we first started our agency, back in the mid to late 90s, we focused in on conversion rate optimization. That was our specialty. We were the first conversion rate optimization agency. And we thought back then that every CEO should care about conversion rates online. Okay. And they should, but it really didn't happen. And of course, today there are a million agencies out there and individuals who can do this. And we don't really do it as much per se. We'll do it for a couple clients here and there. But the point is, when we first started that path, we recognized the opportunity. What a lot of entrepreneurs don't realize sometimes is how long that path is going to take, right? How many arrows those pioneers are going to take in their back, right?
Yes.
Before the industry launches. Because, and I think this is one of the critical things that we pointed out both in the last book and in this book, is that you have to look for what's going to change. And we realized the internet was going to change the way people buy. Fundamentally, it was just going to change it. The problem is we didn't focus in on what Jeff Bezos always advises. What are the things that are not going to change in the next 10 years, right? So our content focus there, but the way we launched our business, we probably could have launched it differently back then to have a wider audience, right? We only realized it before the crash of 2008. What the market really wanted. So, sometimes that journey is a little longer than you expect.
So let's talk about the technology and how it's being disrupted every day, and how your business model may be obsolescent if you don't keep track of updates in the world of technology, and if you don't forecast just precisely that point you made, what is not going to change. So what's been in the news and is trending heavily is Chat GPT 4. I've played around with Chat GPT 3, and I was very impressed with its utility purpose. So Chat GPT 4 is expected to be 1,000 times better. Now, so we are looking at a lot of disruption in the industries and how several industries could be affected. So Bryan, using your repertoire of knowledge and how your particular company was disrupted as a result of not having that foresight to see what was not going to change. Talk to us about what people should be thinking about or considering at this time.
I have a friend of mine, Julie McCoy, who had a content marketing agency. She's written a bunch of books. She's super successful. She just announced yesterday she's joining a startup that, for the first time with all these technologies, can write the long form content the way that she's seen perform for SEO and real quality, and comes off detected as original content. A lot of the stuff that's coming off from ChatGPT now is still, you can tell it's written by an artificial intelligence. And she's making that first move, right? She's realizing that the bulk of content is not going to come from humans anymore, right? We still need to have the skills of getting the most out of that content. So I think we'll always have human editors and the people who prompt those AIs, right, to stay on our brand, to stay on our brand characters. But we are going to be saving a lot of time in creating content. Like, I think what we're going to start seeing, and let's go back to the news industry, right? They're paying a bunch of reporters today to sit around and wait for something to happen and then write about it. Imagine, that AI bot is now connected to Twitter. It recognizes something. It grabs a whole bunch of information about the area, right, that it knows of, and it starts drafting an article in real time. Like, it's not just a quick tweet. And that's where it's going to go. People are always going to want the content in real time. But could somebody today create a new publication that takes the Twitter feed and one of these chatbots, or several of these chatbots, right? Because they can create the imagery, the stuff like that to get people noticed, and create a disruptive media source? And I think the answer is yes.
We're living in interesting times, as the Chinese would say.
That is for sure. But here's the thing. You still have to build a community. So if someone like Nextdoor decided to launch this, it would make a lot of sense. I could know everything that's happening in real time in my neighborhood, in my community, because it's focused in on that. And it already has the community, right? And this is why it's so important to focus in on building communities and building relationships like we talked about earlier.
And that's something that's never going to change, because you're still going to need a community. Whether you have technology or not, you still need a community to connect and to support one another. In fact, that was the reason why humans are at the top of the food chain, was through the act of collaboration, the act of working together to be able to hunt or to be able to defend.
Well, and one more, right? Because if you go back to the first groups of humans, right, when we started getting together, right, and we started, even in caves, you can see the cave paintings, right? We started gathering around the fire.
Yes.
Who was the most powerful person at that point? It was the storyteller.
Correct.
Right. And so I think the skill of storytelling is never going away, right? I think understanding how to draft powerful stories, simple enough for your audience. I don't see ChatGPT coming up with this in the next 3 to 5 years. Okay.
I
Could they
agree
come
with
up
you.
with something like our book Call to Action, which listed hundreds and hundreds of tips on how to improve conversion rate? I think it could probably today, right? I could feed it, hey, let's give it, these categories. These are the 5 ways I look at conversion. Can you come up with 25 suggestions under each of these categories and write it with sources? And sure, it could come up with something. But to tell a great story and have it impact somebody emotionally, it's not quite there yet. It's going to get there, but it's not quite there yet.
I agree. It's in terms of our teacher, Roy Williams, is being able to pull at the heartstrings of people that really motivate them to take an interest in your brand or product or service.
And do it with repetition and consistency.
Correct. And telling it in 1,000 different ways, the same thing that you're trying to tell them about your brand or your story.
Exactly.
Bryan, talk to us about some entrepreneur companies that you've been able to help to go from zero to multi-million-dollar operations. And how did you take them there? What did you do specifically that is still applicable in today's day and age?
When we left our agency, and mind you, we've worked with people like Google and NBC and Universal and Overstock and Dell. We've worked with companies that sell pig sperm online, right? They're in animal genetics. We've done work with people who sell, updating your resume, helping you with your FAFSA forms if your kids are going to college. I mean, we've worked with such a wide variety of entrepreneurs over the year. But when my brother and I left our agency and we decided, okay, we didn't want a whole bunch of people at this point. We're just going to focus in on a little speaking and kind of resetting ourselves. We went back and we started looking at all the companies and the individuals who were wildly successful with some things we did. Like, for example, Overstock. We changed one graphic on their movie page, and that accounted for a 5% top line lift, which was a $25 million to their bottom line.
That's amazing. Okay. Give us some specifics. It's like, what did you do with that graphic image?
Well, that's where I'm going to get to. The secret is each one of them learned how to tell the story of their customers and looking at their business through the lens of their customers. And
makes sense.
What happened with Overstock was real simple. They actually had it was the second most traffic page on their website. And Patrick Burns emails us. It's late at night. My brother's up till who knows what hour. He's chatting with him. They signed a contract in the middle of the night. I wake up like at 5 o'clock in the morning. I see, oh, okay. And I'm like, okay, let me get to work on this. And mind you, they had, several analytics tools that they were working on. They had a statistician. They had like a big teams working on testing this page. Nothing was moving the needle. And I said, okay, let me start telling the story of different types of visitors, right? And this comes from our very first book: a competitive personality visiting the page, a spontaneous person visiting the page, a methodical person visiting a page, a more humanistic person visiting the page. And I'm starting to look through and say, okay, the humanistic, well, there are no reviews, because that's the kind of thing they would look for on a movie. There are no reviews, even though they had hundreds of thousands of reviews on the website, they didn't have it on the page. That would have taken a lot of work to execute, but we're like, okay, that's something that we're going to have to work on later. Then we go ahead and we start looking at the methodical, and they broke it down to top 10 in all the genres. It was hard to find, but and methodicals will go all over until they finally find something. They could have found something. But it was the competitive and the spontaneous people where we realized, so the majority of their audience is just missing the point. So there was a search engine at the very top of the page. And next to the search engine, there was a graphic. And the graphic used to say, kids' titles for learning and fun. And there's a very simple design principle, proximity. Whenever you put two things together, we think they're related. So our story was that these competitive and spontaneous people were coming to the page, looking at it and saying, well, I don't need kids' titles and for learning and fun. I'm out of here. Because they're not going to give you a ton of attention because you didn't speak to them in the language that matters to them. Or as Roy's like to say, speak to the dog in the language of the dog about what's in the heart of the dog. We had them change that one graphic, and that one graphic said, search from over 25,000 DVD and VHS movies for less, or something like that. That accounted for a 30+% reduction in abandonment rate immediately. And then, of course, the 5% lift in sales. Super specific, super easy. But it just came from telling that story from the point of view of the customer seeing that page.
Speaking the language of the customer, hacking the customer's brain.
Exactly. That's never going to change. The customer's always only going to care about what's in it for them.
Exactly.
Right? If you spend all your time talking about you, as we like to say, you're wee-weeing all over yourself.
Yeah. Yes. Good point. You opened up a can of personality profiling and consumer behavior. Let's go ahead and go there a little bit. So, talk to us about how people are uniquely different and what drives their behaviors.
Well, it's interesting. When we first started online, there wasn't a lot of real data sources where you can tap in and personalize your site experience. It was a very expensive process to do. I mean, one of our friends, Jack Aronson, he was one of the first people to lead that initiative on the Barnes and Noble's website. When I know people who worked on the Amazon side of it. It required a tremendous amount of data. The thing is, these 4 personality types, that's universal. We know that this is how people gather information, how they make decisions. And if you follow that, that's a good way. But today, obviously you need to look at, there's different behavior from when people are searching for you, when they hear your brand on the radio or on TV, right? Or they hear it from somebody else, or they find it from social media. And I'll give you a great example. We all love social media. It's a great way to entertain people. It's a terrible way to sell people. You can build a great brand, okay? And I think it's an important aspect of marketing. Like, you can build a humanistic brand for those people to understand who's behind the company. But the more data that you have, then you can apply to personalize that experience, right? Don't treat the guy who's bought from you. I'll give you a perfect example. Why did Walmart, right, not have the same kind of growth that Amazon did online? Walmart had more resources, more data, and Amazon was a little startup. What was the difference?
I
Everything
would
on
say it was
Amazon
the software.
was tied back to the individual, right? I had to
Yeah.
sign in with my email. I had to sign in with my phone. And so they knew everything I did. Every website I visited that had an affiliate, they knew. So they made a profile of understanding, what's going to be interesting to this person. And that's
Yes.
why they convert Prime customers at 74%.
Interesting. Yeah, in navigating the Walmart webpage, there is friction along the process compared to Amazon that is seamless. It's like frictionless to log in, to place an order, and track my order. You can't beat that. I've tried with several other platforms, and I always return to Amazon because
Well,
they
not even
have a
that.
fail-proof system to satisfy my needs.
And it's more than that even, right? Because you could go ahead and you could spend $100,000 a year in Walmart, okay? And I can walk in and I spend $300 a year. And when we both walk in the same door, they don't know who's the most valuable customer. Where in Amazon, they know exactly how much you've spent, how they should treat you. It makes a difference. And the problem is, I don't care what business you're in today. You could be in the roofing business, you can be in the HVAC business, you could be in the painting business. If you don't understand who your customer is, and you can't tell the difference between those who've bought from you beforehand and those who haven't, you're going to struggle.
Because you're not talking to your tribe. You're not talking to hitting that sweet spot of the ideal angel consumer or customer that's going to buy from you and continue to buy from you based upon their personality, their needs, and their buying behaviors.
100%. You exactly right.
So, Bryan, what are the big challenges now that entrepreneurs are faced with when you incorporate everything that's happened compared to the old days? In the old days, you just went and registered a doing business certificate. You got your business cards, maybe some flyers, and you hit the ground running in networking or advertising in newspapers. Okay, I'm dating myself here. That's crazy nowadays. But compared to today's world, it's like, what does an entrepreneur need to do? Let's break it down to the basics. It's like rice and beans basics of what an entrepreneur needs to do.
So number one, and we talk about it in the book, if you've been in sales long enough, everyone tells you sell the sizzle, not the steak. And the reality is, no, today people want to be satisfied. Coming back to that pyramid, right? Attention, interest, desire, action, satisfaction. You got to delight them, right? The steak is the delight part. It's that little extra that you give them, the lagniappe that we talk about, or how you budget for word of mouth. If the staples, right, what you're trying to satisfy them with isn't amazing, you're not going to get to that next level. But it comes back again to the top of that pyramid. The hardest thing today, right? When we were young, when we didn't have these gray hairs, right? There were 3 stations you could advertise on television and you'd reach the majority of America. And today, getting a large audience is very challenging. Not everybody is doing what Mr. Beast is doing, right, on YouTube and on other social media. He's doing something super exceptional at capturing people's attention. And that's what you're competing with today. It's not just a simple ad. You're competing with people wanting to watch Mr. Beast.
And you're in competition with everybody.
That's it. And they're expecting their experiences to be as good as every best experience they've ever had. So, they want the customer service of a Ritz-Carlton. Okay. They want the immediacy of an Amazon or an Uber, right? They want the seamlessness of one click. And if you're not making it that easy for them, they're judging you, unfortunately, right? And they're thinking, hey, your baby's ugly.
Yes. And they won't tell you that. They'll just take their business somewhere else.
Correct. Or they may tell you, they may put a negative review out on social media, but you think, okay, I'll just ignore it and nothing happens. But that negative review will hang around for a very, very long time. You need to address it and you need to fix it. They're trying to help you.
Yes. Excellent point of view, in that you need to address every complaint, because that's an opportunity to win back the customer and have them give you a rave review after you win over and beyond the Call of Duty compared to the old days. Today's day and age, you have to own your customer. You have to keep your hand on their pulse and what they want, what they're thinking, so that you can give it to them.
And find a way to capture their attention, which is not easy.
No. So I am reminded of the former CEO of Walt Disney, Michael Eisner.
Eisner, yep.
I was working at the Houston Chronicle when there was a story that came through the wire that said that the future of advertising was going to be storytelling. And we are there right now. It's like people are immune to pitches, to canned language that people used to use in the old days. Today's language is telling a good story.
Yep, and it starts with that first hook where you grab their attention. And it's funny, the first line of the Rice and Beans Millionaire wasn't written by me. I'm gonna fess up here. It was my son who came up with the line "wet like water."
Wow.
Okay.
That's amazing.
And you're reading the book and it's Rice and Beans Millionaire, and you're wondering, where does this "wet like water" come in from? And so you have to read the next line to understand it, because it's not something you're used to hearing.
Yes.
And that's the whole point. Every word, every sentence has to lead you to the next one. The reason it's so hard today to sell a book like this, right, that's so thick and dense, is because it's hard to keep people's attention for very long that they finish the book. The amazing thing is, this book, people are finishing and reading and reviewing very quickly because they're tiny little chapters. That's all of chapter 4. Not even a page and a half.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Very short chapters that you can move on through the story in a very fast pace, written for today's mind, because people's minds today are digital minds that can process tons of information very rapidly compared to the old days that you would read one page, process it, think about it, relate it to what you already knew or see in terms of practical application. Today's digital minds are very quick in order to be able to do that.
Exactly.
So, Bryan, we're 45 minutes into our interview. Give us some more gold, because you are filled with gold about what it takes to succeed as an entrepreneur.
You know, I think the biggest lesson, if you pull apart from the book and you finish reading it, is you watch the main character Bob go through growth. Every chapter, he's finding a way to make himself better. And I think that's one of the critical skills that a lot of entrepreneurs, we get very satisfied with where we are, and we stop focusing in on how to execute great every single day and how to get better every day, how to surround ourselves with better and better people every day. And as you watch Bob's journey, you realize that slowly but surely, the books he's reading, the people he's interacting with, the people he's hanging around with, especially as they get to the Wizard Academy. We're not going to tell too much there, but they're inspiring him because they've accomplished so much, right? And I think that no matter where you are, if you've had enough of where you are today, if you're not satisfied in your personal life, you're not satisfied in your business life, you're not satisfied in your relationships, invest in yourself. Take that first step, take an action, and start seeing, when you start investing into other people and into yourself, how much more growth is actually in you.
Absolutely. Full disclosure, friends, I had to tell myself, one of my inner critics, who is a literary critic of books, because I'm a voracious reader, is you need to just calm down. You need to read this book with an open mind, with a mind that you don't know anything. Now, that was good in getting started, but my critic kicked in and saying, well, I already knew that. No, you don't. It's like, keep reading, keep an open mind. And I was pleasantly delighted towards the end to see it all come together. So, word of advice to you guys out there that you think you know it all, especially us boomers, you don't, okay? Because what you think you know is going to be a barrier for you to have that curiosity, that childlike mindset to go into a story and be dazzled, be hypnotized, for lack of a better term, into the story, to be immersed in the story, in the nuance of the story, to be delighted by the mystery as you go along in the book.
Yeah, I think you hit it exactly that, right? Like, if you've already been an entrepreneur, okay, you probably don't remember exactly what Bob went through early on in his journey, but you're like, okay. But when you realize that, as you said, I'm trying to tap into your subconscious. I'm trying to tap into
Yes.
greatness that was naturally inside you from
Yes.
the day you first started as an entrepreneur. You're different today if you're an experienced entrepreneur, right?
Correct.
And I've seen that in great entrepreneurs, right? They've stopped thinking about some of these simple things because, let's be honest, they're boring, right? But if you go
Yes.
ahead and, I don't know if you watched the World Cup, okay? My father was a huge football soccer fan, right? He was actually going to play professionally before he got married and moved to the United States. So I grew up, in the 1970s going to see the Cosmos, right? And sadly, we lost Pele recently, but I remember watching him. And I remember watching Giorgio Chinaglia and Beckenbauer. And whether you're a basketball fan, you watch people like Steph Curry, right? My friend Alan Stein, who's a fantastic performance coach and has a book called Raise Your Game, and now also Sustain Your Game. And he talks about this. The elite never get tired of the boring. They obsess over the boring, okay? They obsess over the passing, the moving back and forth, the changing direction, right? And when you start realizing that to be great, you just have to execute on this kind of boring stuff every single day. Because a lot of great entrepreneurs are great at executing when they first start and they launch the business. And then they stop. They stop innovating. And then business passes them by. And their customers pass them by because they stopped focusing in on those key fundamentals.
Exactly. And Bryan, I want to give you credit because it is through reading your book that you rekindle that fire in the belly of a younger me that was fearless in attempting to do something that was impossible for others. And that's why I launched Victor Escalante Live here in this beautiful studio. And again, even though it took right up to the last minute to have all the elements in place, I want to give you credit for that because that's what it takes. It takes that fearlessness, not afraid to be able to make mistakes at the outset, because mistakes can always be improved on and you can pivot to make better and better and better to where you've got a star product or service.
Yep. I wear this when I first started coaching. I made this bracelet for my son and his teammates. It says, "Be better today than you were yesterday." We get fat and happy. We get satisfied with where we are.
Yes.
But you know what? When my brother and I first set out in this industry, we set out to impact the world. That was our goal. It wasn't to make money. It wasn't to make a name. We set out to impact people. And I need to impact a new generation today, right? Crazy story, by the way. I'm going to share with you a fun story from this week. I have 3 kids. They're 20, 21, 17, and 13. My first book I wrote, I think my daughter had just been born. Okay, so it's over 20 years ago, Persuasive Online Copywriting. And this past week, I found a blog post from Grammarly. Are you familiar with Grammarly? Right?
Absolutely. Yes. Yes.
So my kids use that every single day while they're in school, right? One's in college, one's in high school, one's in middle school. And they listed their top 5 copywriting books. And somehow they included Persuasive Online Copywriting over 20 years old.
Wow.
That was the first part where my kids are like, wow, you're cool. Right? But I needed to be relevant for them in this era.
Yes.
And this book inspired my little one to start his own little business. And it's not his final business, but he's learning the principles. You know what? He just had a client. He did all the work. He didn't take great pictures of a before and after. And now the client who came 3 days after he did all the work is saying, well, you know, the leaves is not perfect, blah, blah, blah. And my son learned the lesson, say, hey, you know what? Documentation beats conversation, right? And now he knows, okay, I'm going to take much better pictures. So if you're not there, you're going to know. And I think that's important, right? We handhold our kids too much today. We've got to let them fail. And do I feel bad that my kid's going to lose money and he put in all those hours of work? I do. But I'm going to let him fail because you know what? Next time, he won't make the same mistake twice.
That's how you
learn. It's only going to make him a better and better entrepreneur as he progresses.
Yes. Instant success teaches you nothing. It is through the failures and overcoming adversity that the seeds of greatness are born, so that as the challenges become bigger and bigger and harder, you can rely on that muscle memory of overcoming challenges and moving forward.
Yep. And it comes back to what I told you earlier with my son not being able to go to the World Baseball Classic, right? This is my middle son. That night was devastating for him when he found out that Major League Baseball told the Argentinian Federation that he wasn't qualified. That same night, he also found out that the college coach that he had planned to go play for was also getting fired. He was devastated. And you know what? It hurt that day, and that's okay. But the next day, he came back with a bigger fire, and he's going to prove them all that he can compete at any level. He won't stop. And that fire, like you said, that fire that's burning inside you, that's what we want to kindle in great entrepreneurs. That's how we solve people's problems. That's how we impact people. That's how we get people's attention.
I was having this conversation with a coach from the UK, and he was talking about how as organizations are crumbling because of the systems that no longer work, it requires coaches, it requires consultants, it requires people on the outside to come in and to guide those companies that have their sights on the future, but they don't know how to get there.
Well, we can look at it. What happened with Southwest over the Christmas season, right? They had to cancel
Absolutely.
thousands of fight. I think the number I saw was somewhere at $800 million in losses that they're
Yes.
going to suffer from that.
Yes.
Yesterday, the CEO sent an apology letter that my daughter first started reading, and she's like, I don't know. And then it got better. And you know what? This was a catastrophe for them. Like, it really hurt their business. And it's a shame it didn't have to get that way. Because if they had somebody from outside, because as you know, Roy likes to say, you can't read the label when you're inside the bottle.
That's for sure.
Okay. And they stopped seeing the label. They stopped realizing that their phone system for their employees was a major source of friction. And when you have friction for your employees, guess who also gets friction? Your customers.
Yes.
So first, you need to solve it for the people inside your business. Then they will help the people outside your business succeed as well.
Absolutely. Bryan, any final words for our viewers today?
I'm gonna end on one. The other important thing to me when I wrote this book was the fact that we need role models. We need role models of all kinds. We need role models and the people who show up who are Latino, who are women, who are men, who are trans, whatever it is, right? African American. It doesn't matter. We needed people to be represented, and it was a very important part of writing the book that everybody was represented. And like I said, they're real stories. Like every single story in there is based on a real story that you can figure out who it is if you work hard enough. And I think it was critical that
yes, the Rice and Beans Millionaire. Everyone is going to relate to some story in here. Go ahead, Bryan.
Yeah, that we find those mentors who are out there who want to help us. And so, I encourage you. If you're a successful entrepreneur already, buy a copy of the book, read it, and give it to a young kid and say, hey, I want to be there for you. I want to inspire you to be that next generation. Maybe you take over my business. Maybe you do something else and you compete with me someday. But I want to be there to support you, because if we don't support the next generation, we're all in trouble.
I want to thank you once again, Bryan, for joining us on our premiere show, Victor Escalante Live. You have given us a lot to think about, and I look forward to your trajectory and having you back as a guest to tell us about how this story that you told is going to continue to evolve, because you started a fire here. It's like, this is not the end. This is just the start.
100%. Back when we wrote the other books, we had a big agency. We had a super huge email list. And I'll tell you, and I'll be honest with you, over the last couple of years, things have been difficult emotionally, obviously with COVID. And, I made that decision that for me, it was more important to be around the house than trying to focus in on, building, speaking, or, and traveling. My friend Alan, who I mentioned earlier, Alan Stein, shares a quote that by the time your kids graduate high school, you will have spent 93% of the time with them. And so to me, it was about being present for them. And that cost us, right? Because I wasn't as active on social media. I wasn't building my tribe. I wasn't focused on that. But I knew I had this story that needed to be told. And you know what? It's a lot of hard work building up a tribe from almost nothing again. That kind of like, oh yeah, you're trying to do something new and different, but it's that fire in the belly.
Yeah, especially in my case of being in legacy media and starting from scratch to build a brand. People still associated me with working at the Houston Chronicle or the Houston Business Journal and not looking at the current me of what I can do for you. So exactly. I've been there.
Yep. So here we are. We're going to support each other. We're going to support, next generation of people who have tons of wisdom to share. Just as we do at the Wizard Academy, right? There are wise men out there with lots of experience. And when you share that experience of what's never going to change, you're going to make a lifelong impact.
Absolutely. I look forward to seeing you at Wizard Academy in coming months.
Thank you so much.
Take care, my friend.
Thank you.